a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this incredibly cool episode, guys, Mark Steeves returns from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy to talk to us about comics, superpowers, alchemizing limitations, the Homunculus, Animorphs for God's sakes, and of course, the interests of New Haven that he has found interesting to share with us that are also fascinatingly interesting. So there's a video component to this, so check the show description down there for expandingrealitypodcast.com. It's where you can get the free video version of this, and you're not going to want to miss it. So, of course, all the ways to find him located down in the show notes, all the ways to find us respectively, and without any further ado, Mark Steeves. Mark Steeves, hanging out. Good to see you, dude.
I am happy to be here.
Yeah. This is going to be a blast. You recently had me on your show. Thank you so much. It was an outstanding conversation. We really got a lot of things out that I was able to articulate about the new things that we're doing with the publishing house, and I really appreciate the platform and the time to do that. You asked incredible questions as always. Guys, linked below, of course, all the ways to find him. We just had an outstanding conversation and highly recommend that you check that and all of his episodes out. You just have the most incredible people on. Like me, you're empowering, you empower others. So you bring on folks that, really point out actionable things here, but also incredibly cool, mysterious things. So with these bring them backs, we're not going to kind of just go, hey, will you introduce yourself for the audience? I'm going to link it below, guys. Check out the links for the first time that Mark was on. And of course, all the other ways to find him. Other than that, brother dude, what have you been up to?
Well, brother dude, I have been very busy. So busy that I think I imploded some part of my disciplined brain. And I just had I was reeling from research. Have you ever gone down a research rabbit hole so far that you need to do the opposite for a few weeks just to get back into maybe a more balanced? So I've been doing a lot of research into New Haven, Skull and Bones, history, the history of this location, where Skull and Bones now takes its, rightful throne at Yale, the Ivy Tower of Yale, and this academic, powerhouse. Skull and Bones is right there on the top of the hierarchy, they've had presidents of the United States, presidents of the Yale College, which is in their case a little bit more relative to their story, because I'm not saying anything that's that far-fetched here. Skull and Bones almost entirely controls Yale University. Its influence, at least at one point in time, made its way all the way up to the president of the college itself. But I've been just trying to figure out all this stuff, and naturally when you go down any sort of research rabbit hole, you're going to get kind of bogged down. And then especially when it's something as dark as this, Skull and Bones, and it's something I've been passionate about for 10 years. When I first came to New Haven and as a student, I'd been to New Haven a couple times throughout my childhood. I always lived near it, but because it's kind of, it's not like your average city. It's mostly a college, some very fancy restaurants, and that's it. There wasn't really much of a reason for me to go there when I was a kid. But it became endlessly fascinating and still is. And every time I go to the city, I find something new, something interesting. But what's interesting is I was like, yeah, I need to take a little break because I feel burnt out. So for whatever reason, comic books and action figures like pulled themselves into my brain from the like corner, the recesses of my nostalgic child mind, you know, like I don't remember exactly what did it, but I remember when I was a kid, Toy Biz came out with the coolest line of action figures. It was Marvel Legends Toy Biz. And these action figures were, not only were they the coolest, but they came with like little like accessories, and it was for an 8-year-old who loved the superheroes. It was mind-blowingly cool. And I found a bunch of them in my dad's house, some of my old guys, and it sparked this like chain reaction where now I got the gang back together. I got my old comic books, I got my old action figures, and that has been my way of kind of getting off of the research rabbit hole and kind of like balancing me out a little bit. But yeah, you're looking at them right there.
Dude, that is so cool. I love that we have the same nothing boxes. I've heard a psychologist phrased it this way, where he said that he referred to it as men and women, but you can scale this up to just needing a break, right? And it was that there's women specifically can connect everything to emotions because of the way that their mind works. Everything's connected. So an action's connected to a feeling's connected to a result and all of these things. Men, as a psychological observation, have this ability to compartmentalize, meaning like when you're working on your car, you're not thinking about emotionally what happened to you at work 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like there's a very set, like, okay, we're focused on this. And so we can compartmentalize them into what they refer to as boxes. This is, and then the butt of the joke and the idea behind the psychological study was the observation that men, whenever asked, what are you thinking, from a woman, can say nothing and mean that, because there's a box of nothing that we pull off of a shelf and we get into it and it doesn't connect to anything like y'all's minds do. So we get a break. And so a nothing box of mine is this, Legos are another one for me, but it's specifically superhero Legos, Marvel Legos, DC, stuff like that. So this dude, animated stuff, I love this. And it's so interesting though that we have the same thing, and specifically these sort of, that realm, you know what I mean? That world. It could have been anything, you know what I mean? But the softer, but still more imaginative realm to get out of the heaviness of the shit that's here. You know, it's a really cool thing, dude. Thank you.
Yeah, and I remember we talked about this the last time we connected, and you mentioned the Legos, and yeah, I think it's something. Legos in particular are a little different in the sense that like it's constructive, and it's probably the least limiting toy. Like with Legos, you have a rule book or an instruction guide, but who's ever following that? When I was a kid, I just ripped open the boxes and threw all the Legos into one giant Tupperware.
Oh, you sadist.
And that was my kit, you know, and I could make whatever I want out of those Legos. And really, unless someone had that same combination of Legos, you know, it was kind of like a unique set, right? So you could make whatever your Lego box limitations were. So I would just make like bases and towers and spaceships and stuff.
Hell yeah.
I love it. Now, here's the thing. I expected the action figure comic book route to be a nothing box, kind of like a dead end where I could just chill and let some of those other thoughts hang on their own for a bit. And I'd come back and revisit the research, right? Well, little did I know that all of these comic book writers are basically like guys like you and me. Yeah. They didn't have podcasts back then, but they're, you know, getting their rocks off researching this kind of stuff and then including it into their work. So I've just been like really, and I hope my audience doesn't like get bothered by my obsession with comic books all of a sudden, but I've just been finding so many references to conspiracy theories in the comic books that I've been getting into. I mean, from Wolverine potentially stopping the assassination of JFK in one issue to the Fantastic Four kind of like basically, I think basically disclosing the whole Nazi thing and how the Nazis, I mean, Captain America fights these Nazis after World War II. I mean, they're talking
Hydra.
about stuff
Yeah,
that we're basically researching. And I never made that connection. You know, when I was younger, obviously I couldn't, because I didn't know all this stuff I know now. But I always had this sort of, I don't know, erroneous thought that, oh yeah, that's just all silly stuff. There's nothing real there. But of course it's real. They have to, you know, they can't just come up with all of this stuff off the top of their head. They're mixing reality and, you know, into this fictional narrative. And that to me was kind of the biggest realization. It's almost like, you know, you try to turn away from something and it's there, you know, showing its face in a different mask almost, you know, like I tried to avoid the heavy stuff and here it is back again in the comic books.
Like, not you, Stanley, not you, man. I'm coming to you for refuge. And here you are talking about Nazi infiltration and mind control and all that shit. You're like, come on, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's Wolverine with the Weapon X thing.
Weapon X, yeah.
He basically gets, mind controlled and turned into this, you know, adamantium skeleton killing machine, even though he's just a normal dude. He doesn't want to be a killing machine. You know, he's got a mutant healing factor, and that's why they picked him to become that weapon. But, you know, he's just a normal guy with a mutant healing factor before that.
Yeah. And because he could survive the process. It's so cool, dude. Yeah, so we could nerd out on this. And I will one more thing, because the movie Logan, remember that? You saw this?
No,
Logan, where
I'm gonna watch.
Then I don't want to. Okay, then we can't talk about this yet. Okay, then when you watch it, let me know. Here, actually, no. So there's a study in it, and it basically shows what happens when superheroes get old and like lose their mind, literally. Like you could picture a superhero with dementia. What would that look like? They would be they wouldn't be able to control their power. And so then, especially someone with the power over the being able to control mind at such a powerful capacity, like Charles Xavier, for instance, what would it look like if he had dementia, and how would it affect the people around him? Like, would he make people's heads explode, you know, and shit like that, but not on purpose, just because he's failing in his faculties as he ages? It's an interesting thought experiment, you know?
Yeah, well, they just got to give him a Magneto helmet at that age.
Yeah, see, there's the fix, because it's impervious. Thank you, Mark. You just solved this. That was brilliant. Okay.
Put a Magneto helmet on
Stick it on.
Dementia Professor X.
Put a strap under his chin so he can't take it off, you know, tape up his hands or something. Yeah.
He's levitating the nurses.
Yeah. Throwing bedpans at him and shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. See, now this is why it is a little bit of a problem, because I've gotten into this stuff so much that now I'm like, oh yeah, everybody loves comics when people come to my show for conspiracy and stuff. So I have to be respectful to my audience and understand that not all of them are into comic books like I am. But if they want to, you know, if they like the references, maybe they could comment and reassure me, because I do feel a little weird about it. Like,
really?
Not that I'm like, it's not that I'm like embarrassed or anything. I just don't want my show to become this thing where it's like, oh, Mark can't shut up about comic books ever since he talked to that, you know, like I don't want to like take the show off of the trajectory we're on. But it is fair. Nice to have like a respite, I guess, at a rest period from the research, right? Because that's kind of really, I think as a content creator, you could relate to this. Like if you go really hard into one, you know, direction without kind of being flexible enough to switch it up, kind of be more fluid, you can burn yourself out. And I've experienced that in the past with other things before I've done podcasting. So I guess it's reassuring to find out that, you know, you're interested in this kind of stuff. If you were like, oh yeah, comic books, oh, I don't know about that, I would be like, yeah, I should probably stop talking about this. But you're encouraging me now.
Oh, brother. We could go, because there are so many things to talk about in comics. Like, and to this, actually, I'm going to post this or just show this on camera. You guys check the link in the show description for the video version of this, expandingrealitypodcast.com. Paranoid American Thomas, of course, has this Geronimo's Grave, and you sent me this. This is awesome. This is a comic that you guys are hooked up in making. And of course, you've had Thomas on quite a bit, and he's a dear friend. This type of style stuff, guys, for the video version of it, again, but I'm going to link all this stuff in the show notes. Look at that. Look how badass that is. And so you're telling esoteric stuff, like what happened to Geronimo's skull through the Skull and Bones. And it's an awesome way to present information, and it's exciting. And thank you for sending that to me.
Yeah.
So I love this. And so, okay, I've been looking at the idea of limitation and what that does to us psychologically. And I have been shunning the idea of limitation in droves, dude. And so I wanted to ask you about this idea specifically to what we've been talking about here. One of the ideas goes is that what you must do is basically not forget, but integrate and overpower the idea of limitation, right? So we've been given the idea of limitation. Let's speak specifically to superpowers. Let's say that superpowers in some dimension, in some reality, are absolutely accurate and they do occur. Maybe it's a genetic thing like what we're presented with in the comics, which is a great idea, by the way. So it kicks on at puberty. So you don't have super babies like laser in there. The same reason you would want old superheroes that have lost their faculties. You wouldn't want young ones as well, right? So they put in there like around puberty, whatever, you kind of get them. So the whole idea, though, goes with this gene idea, but perhaps, and this is what I want to ask you about. Do you think it could be just a belief idea to where we could overpower it in the sense that maybe by deliberate intention, forget the idea that we've been taught that specific limitation? And we do this in a myriad of ways. So you overcome it, overpower, and integrate. But could you be more focused, in your opinion, and there's, just what do you think, about directing your energy perhaps to a universe, a multiverse, if you believe in such a thing, to where you transfer to a dimension to where that limitation was never in the public psyche to begin with. And you do this with intention. Because as the multiverse goes, there's an infinite number of realities right there. And there's realities in which superheroes absolutely exist. So do you think that we could do this?
Wow. I think that is presupposing a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's simpler than that. I think what you just described is possible, but I think it would take quite a mind to get yourself out of one dimension into another. I think what's more possible is that your inner limitations that you're describing that we all have are just not as rigid or solid as we've been taught. Like when I was a kid, I remember there was a show called Animorphs. You remember that show?
I think so, yeah.
The whole point of the show is that each team was, like able to morph into a different animal, and it, played a role in their life somehow. If they were a high school swimmer, they probably animorphed into a dolphin, or if they were a high school basketball player, they probably animorphed into a gazelle or something. Right?
While you're talking about this, I've got the video version of this up, guys. These graphics are phenomenal. What is this? Is this a centaur? What is this? These starfish. Look at this one here, dude.
The most amazing thing about Animorphs is exactly what you're pointing out, is the 90s graphics where the teenagers actually like morph into animals, and you could see each stage of their evolution. So it's like, the middle one, it's like half animal, half teen, which is hilarious because it's 90s effects, 90s graphics. Yeah, it's hysterical. But when I saw this when I was a kid, it wasn't like funny. It was just like cool. I was just like, whoa, this is everything I've always wanted, to become an animal, right? I loved animals when I was a kid. That was a game I played in my mind, like, oh, I'm a cheetah, run around fast. Oh, I'm a monkey, climb up a tree, right? So kids do this. This is naturally a kid's kind of instinct, is to imitate animals. But when I saw that show, it kind of clicked in my head in a way that like, oh, this is possible. And, as a kid, you see it on TV, kind of gives you an example. And that was a fairly, what do they call it? Live action show, right? It wasn't animated. There were animated parts of it, but those were real actors. So it was kind of interesting as a kid to have that example and then grow up and find out that actually this is an ancient human practice of embodying the consciousness of an animal, embodying the spirit of an animal, and actually transforming your consciousness in some way through that process. So just like you said, your question originally that made me bring up Animorphs, do you think it's possible to kind of imagine yourself into a multiverse or out of this dimension into another dimension in the multiverse where there are less limitations? I would say you could just bring those lack of limitations to this reality, because your mind is constantly plastic, right? It's always improving, growing, shaping itself into something new. And when I was younger, I had probably, a dozen possible routes that I could have gone down. Every human does at a certain age. You have, a multitude of paths in front of you that you could go down. Could have gone down the road of, drug addict. Could have gone down the road of boozer. Could have gone down the road of loser. Could have gone down the road of landscaper. Could have gone down the road of, so on and so forth. I'm not going to sit here and name all the different examples that Mark could have went down, right? But that was a reality at 12 years old. Those were all possible futures for this person that is me. Instead of any of that, I'm in this beautiful, amazing reality where I'm my own boss. I have friends like you all over the country, beautiful people who are inspiring and as positive as I am, right? Because this is a choice I made when I was younger to learn about the law of attraction, to learn about positivity and putting your best foot forward and swinging with the pendulum. Because although I have put my best foot forward on many occasions, I've also taken 2 steps back on some occasions too. And that's something that we have to accept, right? Is that we all have those limitations, but I think our limitations can be minimized when we start to project ourselves forward into the future with our imagination and our, how we see ourselves. And we've been taught by society that imagination and character building aren't a part of the same kind of like character building and creating your future. That's all stuff that needs to be done with a guidance counselor and your parents, right? No. Your imagination is your guidance counselor, and I think because people have so low confidence and so low choices, maybe of lower variety of choices perceived, right? Because that's not the truth. They have a huge multitude of choices. They're only perceiving a small amount of those. And that's really what's keeping us in this kind of limited dimension. So I think, it's way more possible for us to experience things like telepathy and synchronicity and other sort of supranatural skills that are just, right on the precipice of what we can do. Like they're not flying or shooting laser beams from our hands, but in a way, compared to the average person, they are superpowers in our society, and I think that's kind of how society's been geared to keep people away from understanding their true power so that those who set those wheels in motion have a kind of monopoly on that power. And now that we're in the age of information, they're not going to have that monopoly for much longer. And this is the process that we're in right now, is helping people wake up and engage in this different way of living your life where you're not, held back by the limitations you're given by your parents, the limitations you're given by your environment, and the limitations you're given through experience. Those are all things that are natural, and, obstacles are in our path. We just have been taught that, sometimes it's better to take shade in the obstacle's wake rather than jump over it, because the sun's too hot. So just take cover in this little groove that you found yourself in. I say bash through the obstacle and make your way to the next one and keep going.
Embodying Ganesh, the destroyer of obstacles, man. I love that.
Yeah. I hope I didn't ramble too much, but you understand where I'm going, right?
No, it was perfect, because it now leads me to the question of intentional evolution. So now what you're talking about is being able to manipulate us, which Dr. Bruce H. Lipton has been talking about for a long time, this idea of epigenetics, that you're above your genetic programming, and that really it's not necessarily completely 100% dependent on your parents, and you can supersede that. This is why you'll have parents that are overweight, kids that aren't, right? I mean, there's many, you'll have little people in families of people who are not little people, right? So there are these things where there's genetic anomalies that occur, which you want in diversity, right? It's so important. But this idea, again, of sort of directing your evolution consciously with being able to heal yourself, not only that, but then, of course, removing the limitations of even that, like your ability to heal yourself. And so, like you said, this stair step of sort of wading into the water rather than being plunged in it, because, yeah, that would be a traumatic thing. People start shooting laser beams out of their eyes. We saw how much of a struggle it was for young Cyclops there when he had to wear sunglasses and his eyes itched and shit. So that transition period would be there. Now, also, it's interesting, this idea, again, of removing these limitations, but then to be sort of just a stair step. Have you seen all of the videos of the people that set a toothpick up like on a fixed thing, and then they'll put a piece of foil that's been folded over on top of it? They put a glass dome over it so there's no wind or anything affecting it as what they present. And then they'll put their hand on it and go like this on the outside, move it, and it'll spin in a certain direction. Very slowly. It's very subtle. I'll pull something up here in a minute and show you. But this made me think of that movie Looper. Do you remember that movie with Bruce Willis and the dude? Okay. In that movie, for the audience, there was that little coin trick that everybody had. There were a certain amount of people, and it was like a silly amount. So it was old to them at that point. Like people could rotate coins in their hand with this telekinetic ability that for us would be amazing. But they were over it like just a few decades from now in the future because it was so prevalent. But also it wasn't that spectacular. You know, you weren't like flipping buses over. You were flipping a coin, and even that was a struggle, right? So that again leads to the stair step. So yes, and yeah. So what do you think of that? That it is sort of like a stair step thing that we can remove our limitations just simply like any other muscle by flexing it, right? Because there are like those monks that can set shit on fire with their hands and stuff, and that's fascinating.
I think one of the, and this is going to sound maybe like a challenge to anyone who's not athletic or an athlete or maybe doing a regular workout, which I'll admit I'm not regularly working out, but there was a point in my life where, and I'll get into that. So let me describe this. So I think that human beings at our current role, wherever we are on the, evolution, if we want to see things as a scale of evolution, I think we've kind of devolved away from what we used to be into these like kind of more thinking, like you've seen the homunculus thing where it's like, this is the little man inside of your brain. And it's like shaped the way our perception interacts with the world around us. So like oversized hands, oversized eyes, because those are the two main senses we're using all the time, right? Our touch, our sense of vision, if we're not visually impaired, and then probably like lips would be as big because we're talking all the time, and then eating all the time, right? So that's what that's like a stylized sort of depiction of a human being based on, what parts of the human being are being used the most as the largest parts, right? It's like a, what's it called? An analogous model. It's not accurate to what we really look like, but theoretically, these are the parts of our body that have the most impact on our life. Now, I think in the past, it wasn't like that. I don't think we were as dependent on those main five senses. I think we were more of a, yes, here it is. Thank you. So the giant hands, giant mouth, giant lips, giant eyes, right? That's all where our brain is emphasizing the most activity. So to our brain, I mean, this is what we're essentially you kind of think of this as like a model of what our brain interacts with as us, as human beings, right? This is how our brain kind of sees us. It's very hard to explain. I'm struggling to explain it, but I hope people are getting the message. Now, there's a part of your brain when you work out that gets activated. I know this because when I was younger, I was into martial arts, I was into smoking weed, and I used the two in conjunction with one another. I would meditate, get high, I work out. And something happened during these years when I would do this kind of workout under the influence of cannabis and also with meditating. I pushed myself past barriers that were once there. And I think once I pushed myself past those barriers, I was able to do things like run, sprinting up the side of a mountain, which I did multiple times. There's a mountain called West Rock in New Haven. I used to live not too far from the base of it, and I would run it up the mountain as a challenge, until I was exhausted. And again, I don't work out that often anymore, so I'm not sitting here like David Goggins, like, you got to work out, but I think there's something that happens to your mind when this process is undergone and extremely strenuous, when you really push yourself past your limitations mentally. And your body will always, so long as you don't hurt yourself by like jumping off of something or really, really pushing it too far, your body will recover always, for the most part. You have to be like really beating yourself up to put yourself in a position where your body doesn't recover from a workout. So, and I think our minds have that same, even stronger, probably times 10, that same ability to do that. And again, I'm not trying to sit on some high horse like, oh, you guys got to work out if you want to be smart. But I think there is an inherent connection to that. Like, it's why athletics are, I guess, required with certain schools, right? Everybody goes through gym class, but I think that people who excel at extreme workouts have a mental framework that allows them to enter into this kind of exactly what you described, this other dimension. It's through that pain gate, that workout, pushing yourself, that you're able to reach that mental fortitude. That's actually where you find, I guess, a blissful reality. And I think the reason why we might not necessarily connect the two is because in the past, spiritual people would do sort of aesthetic things to achieve this goal. But I think it's possible to do that with stress and working out. That's what the Native Americans would do with sweat lodges, pushing yourself to your ultimate, right? Your body can only take so much over a long period of time till you need rest from that heat, right? But putting yourself through that strengthens you, strengthens your soul, and creates a peace that, really our society doesn't want us to know, because it's predicated on fear. So if society had a bunch of strong warriors, the whole propaganda machine would fall, right? So I think that's kind of where a lot of people might not see sports in a kind of primal, ancient position, but it really is. It's like connecting with who we are as human beings when you push yourself to that. And, to connect it back to like comic books and superheroes, like what are superheroes, but like the archetype of what we see ourselves as. They're just like, exaggerated versions of ourselves in a lot of ways. So, and I wouldn't say that I'm a superhero, but compared to who I was when I was younger and who I am now, I think my younger self would look at this version of Mark and say, oh, wow, you've achieved something, right? And I could have easily gone down a road where, I'm Mark Steeves with a beer belly and I drive a freaking, a pickup truck and I do junk, like junk runs. Like there's a bunch of junk run. That's why it's on my mind, because there's a bunch of junk on the street right now, and people are doing junk runs, like looking for scrap metal and stuff. I could have easily been a dude doing that, right, instead of a guy doing a podcast. And yeah, I think my younger self would be like, oh yeah, this is a hell of a way to live compared to, I don't know, my dad or my grandpa. They both have great lives, but it's just nowhere near as interesting as this.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad this morning, and he was just asking me, hey, so what do you got going on? I'm like, how much time you got? He's like, I got a lot of time. I really want to know what you got going on. And so I'm just telling him, some things, and he's just like, wow. And then I go, what are you doing? And he goes, nothing near as interesting as that. And he goes, but that's an awesome gift that you've given us. He goes, because we were able to raise you to be able to experience that. And I'm like, exactly. See how this works? And now I'm sharing. Okay. So, yeah. And I love this, though, this idea of the connecting to, again, this higher self through all these different modalities, and then it being expressed and visualized in the way of the homunculus is a brilliant representation for us to sort of look around and go, oh, okay, we're getting a lot of our observations of this reality from these senses. So if this is the way that society says that we do this, and it's all brain mapped, there's an interesting study on this. It's really cool. I'm glad you brought it up. Then, perhaps there are areas on here where we could say, well, what about that looks unattractive? Or where can we look at that and say, actually, I'd like to build those arms up a little bit. I'm actually surprised the wiener's that small. I thought, honestly, that more attention would be on that, to be fair. I'm looking at there's many representations of this. The wiener is proportional. But it's an interesting, thing, again, when you get into this kind of stuff. So what I like about this, man, and what I'm hearing, as I'm just inspired to say as we're talking about this here, is accessing, this idea of accessing things rather than identifying as them. I'll use a quick example. I've been hearing this a lot in really powerful people that I consider powerful, that I consider superheroes, and I absolutely consider you a superhero, and I'll tell you why. Because you are willing to look within and to serve without. So you go within and you recognize what's going on. So I've redefined superhero for me. We say comics and all of that, but the real fucking superheroes, the ones with the real superpowers here, are you. You are like the ones that go within and that will be of service in this way after the introspection, because before you understand the order of operations in a different way. So what I was thinking about on this was sort of accessing in a way. So again, when people say I'm sad, what that is that's a statement, that's a declaration, right? But when phrased in the sense of I'm accessing sadness, it's different. It's temporary, right? You're borrowing it for a little bit. You have a choice to hang on to it for as long as you want or access it as long as you want, and then you can give it back, right? So again, but when you take it and you rip it off from the whole and you say, I am sad, now you're hanging on to it. Now you just carry it around with you everywhere. But this idea of accessing, so to what you were saying, it's almost like the Akashic records of physical abilities, which of course they would be in there, right? The idea of accessing these parts of everything that are out there all the time, like it's similar to accessing the Akashic records, but you're accessing this power, if we want to call it that. This new physical way of interacting with your world would be a way to phrase it. So in that way, it may not be so insurmountable in the moment, right? You just phrase it as, hey, this is just a new physical way I want to interact with the world. I'd like to be able to go like that and queef a pin across the street. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be something interesting. And so again, I don't think we're beyond any of this shit. What do you think? Just accessing those sort of ideas and then bringing them into the physical, which is what some people think we do anyway with everything.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're as much the container that is our body as we are the container that is our environment. So I don't know if it's as simple as being able to control all the parameters within the totality of a human. I think we also have to understand our environment and how to interact with that. And I think when we can interact with our environment, it may appear to those who don't understand what's going on like we're performing some sort of magic or supernatural abilities. I mean, everything from telekinesis to weather manipulation have been demonstrated, maybe not under scientific, rigorous, rigors, but yeah, they're possible. And I think that's kind of the problem with science, is that it expects things to work in a way that they naturally don't. It presupposes artificial conditions on nature and then finds no results because it's expecting something that isn't there. And that homunculus with its tiny penis, I think is probably a good model of somebody like a scientist who is constantly working with their mind, their hands at the keyboard or at a pen and paper, right? I wonder if they do that same brain map study with someone who's like a laborer who works all day on a farm, or someone who works maybe as a mixed martial artist, or maybe somebody who works as a boat captain, right? I think different people are going to have a different model of homunculus map, right? I mean, that whole word homunculus, if you want to really understand it, my buddy Juan has done a ton of really interesting research into the alchemical origins of that word. But as far as the way we're using it, it's just sort of a psychological term. So it's important to distinguish that the alchemical homunculus and the sociological, psychological homunculus are not necessarily the same idea. Just for listeners who may be familiar with Juan's work and are getting excited right now, it's a little different, but definitely there is a thread there. But yeah, I think that map is flawed, and it's because these scientists are measuring humans who are maybe not ideal, right? I think we could be healthier, more in tune, in harmony with our environment. And I wonder what that kind of homunculus would look like, a homunculus that was more in tune, because this is as you say, they're using brain mapping to kind of create this model and say like, okay, well, this is the parts of the body that receive the most interaction with the brain. So we'll kind of proportionate the body based on which parts of the brain are being interacted with and vice versa. I wonder, if that could change depending on a person's lifestyle.
This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for brekkie, lunch, or dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. They just drop them at your door, people. You'll save time and eat well. You'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while taking all of your holiday to-dos in stride with good meals in the tum-tum. If you're too busy with all this stuff, these meals are easy to get done. They taste great. All you've got to do is head over to factormeals.com/expandingreality50 and use code expandingreality50 to get 50% off. That's code expandingreality50 at factormeals.com/expandingreality50 to get 50% off. Yeah, this is what I'm thinking is because when I look at this, dude, I think of like the claymation things from the 80s that like used to be sort of like the tricksters, and they would, I'm sure there's got to be some of these in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting because then you say, okay, well, what would mine look like, right? Maybe there's some sort of Carillion photography equivalent to being able to create a 3D model of your homunculus because it would be different, right? So maybe your heart's real big, maybe, things like that over other things. Dong would probably be about the same size for me, to be honest. But it seems like this is just such an interesting way of anthropomorphizing the idea of how we interact with our world. Like they've got just some really interesting.
I don't mean to harp on the crass here, but I do think that's like you said that as a joke, but it is fascinating because I think sexually, like the human mind is more of like where we find ourselves sexually than the body. Right. I think that is what that's speaking to, is that like, even though, physically we associate all this sensuality with our body, especially that part of our body, we're still primarily mental beings who are like, even in one of the most physical forms of, getting together, we're still in our brains. Like, I think that explains the female orgasm in some ways.
Huh. Do you want to go on that for the audience?
That we got to say for the Patreon.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
folks
fair.
want to sign up for my $100 tier. I explain how to do all that, G-spot, everything. We talk about it all on the $100 tier on my Patreon.
Outstanding. Okay. Very good. Pants optional, as always. All right.
Well,
so I'll
video, there's no video for that.
okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's audio.
It's not an instructional. Got it. I love it, man. Well, what is it that you've been working on lately? Because you've been doing these tours in New Haven, and I'm just curious about this because I'd love to walk around someplace and get your opinions and insights and observations on things. So tell folks about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I have some slides if we want to give the video viewing audience a treat.
Dude, we love that. And linked in the show notes, guys, so check that out for the video version of this for the audio only audience. And yeah, we'd love that, man.
So New Haven is, it, like I said earlier, it's not like a super big tourist town because all that's really there is Yale, right? I mean, there's water, but it's Long Island Sound, so it's not like, your typical beach. But it is an interesting place. It's a beautiful place, but primarily it's an intellectual crowd that's coming in and out of New Haven because they're there for Yale. Maybe they're there because their children are at Yale, family members live there, work there, etc. It's not exactly like a tourist trap, but there are some things about New Haven that I just couldn't reconcile with like a normal city. There are things that stand out in New Haven that I haven't found repeated anywhere else. So we'll get into that as soon as I pick up this slide here, if I can find it in my many folders on my computer. It's just a jungle of folders here. Give me one moment.
It totally happens. No worries at all. And again, just want to thank you for this. This is awesome. And again, guys, all the ways to find him, of course, linked down in the show notes. Make sure you check out My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. Of course, Alt Media United, Rockfin, and everywhere that they're served. You guys check him out for damn sure. Outstanding conversations, man. It's a wonderful platform.
Thank you. So we should start with this tower, the tallest tower in Connecticut. And I will share my screen in just a moment. But yeah, the tallest tower in, did I say Connecticut? I meant New Haven, is the Connecticut Financial Center. Okay. And the acronym CFC is also the number 363, right? C is the third number in the alphabet. F is the sixth number in the alphabet. So we have CFC. Well, the building itself is 383 feet tall, minus the 20-foot pyramid on the roof, making the building 363 feet tall. So what are the odds that the tallest building in New Haven is called the Connecticut Financial Center, which is also, like, in a way, the same number as it is high off the ground, right? 363 feet. So there are these kind of like little things going on. 3 plus 6 is 9. New Haven is a 9 square grid. And that is what we're going to kind of look at in a moment here. If I could just find this.
It's always, dude. And it's Mercury retrograde. It totally happens now. This is why it does that. I treat the Mercury retrogrades, and we just tell, as you're looking here, as just slowdowns, like school zones from the universe. It's like, dude, just slow down. All your electronics are going to be silly. Communication's going to be off between people, and emails are going to get sent weird. Like texts are going to get sent with different energy. And it's just like a moment to just kind of pause and go, you know what? Yeah, we'll just slow down. Treat them as reflection times. They used to be just like oh God, Mercury retrograde, get fucked. Like, don't schedule anything, like pins and needles. But now it's just, okay, it's fine. They're a natural cycle, and it's just an introspection point for me now. It's wonderful.
Well, I get so slick with my like folder names that I forget them all. And then I'm like, what folder did I put that in? Because I think like, oh, this will be smart. I'll make a new folder just for these types of presentations. And then but now I have it. So I'm sharing my screen, and we are Going to be viewing this in just a moment, as soon as it loads.
Awesome.
All right. Boom. So, and I should say, if anybody is in the New England area, they want to drive down to New Haven, they are more than welcome to reach out to me on Instagram. Let me know when you'll be there, and I'd be happy to meet you downtown and give you a little tour. So, can you see this?
Yeah, looks great.
So this is a front cover of my new PDF, and I'm going to be using this to kind of show you guys some images. And if you're curious about all of the information, you could pick up this PDF on my website, and I will have printed copies, hopefully one day, maybe through Rediginal Publishing. So
Very soon. Yes, sir.
we'll see. But so I named this aesthetic, and that's because I like to do the acronyms. And it stands for an architectural symbolic comparative inquiry into topographical intelligence and culture. What does that mean? Well, it means that when you're walking around a city and you're observing the buildings, the artwork, the layout of the city itself, the advertisements even, there is a symbolic culture there. There is an intelligence. There are minds that have crafted what you're seeing to be a certain way. And maybe they've even, in cases like New Haven, gone through great lengths to plan the city to be a certain way, and have certain images almost to pull symbols from the past and then anchor them into the present. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So New Haven was originally formed around this center square here, and they built a 9-square grid, which was kind of a customary in England at the time. Obviously, this is not in England. This is New England, Connecticut, to be specific. For people who don't know where Connecticut is, because you didn't pay attention in geography class, it's right next to New York City, folks. So we're right near New York to the east. And New Haven is one of the primary port cities along the Connecticut coast, or at least it wanted to be. Never quite kicked off to be a big business in New Haven, but Yale's college luckily kind of saved New Haven from just being another random small town. Now, the 9-square grid is fascinating because it's been there since the 1600s. This is how the city was planned, laid out in the 1600s, and they've maintained that form through all the many centuries. And it's really interesting to see. There's a few new roads that are kind of bisecting the squares, but it's probably one of the few, if not the only, in the entire country. One of the few cities, and it's, I think, a United States national landmark because of that. So, fascinating stuff. And
yeah, it reminds me of a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, I wonder. I had never made that connection. Maybe this is a colorful map, and that's where you're getting that association. But yeah, that's interesting.
3x3. Yeah, the 12 square here.
Yeah, and this is something that, in magic, Western mandala magic. Oh, wow, there you go.
Yeah, it's got the 3x3. So it's interesting. So then now I'm curious about what they thought about the cube, if the cube had any part of this or what this is, because of course it's just a 2D representation of a 3D cube. It's interesting. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Just what I thought of.
Yeah, I think the cube is definitely a part of this. Now, New Haven was kind of oriented towards the north on a 32-degree angle. So this 9-square is on a 32-degree angle. If you were to draw a line going east to west, the pyramid or the square would be kind of tipped on one of its angles. So, 32 degrees. I don't know if that was a choice that was made or if that is just how it was done back then. But fascinating to think that one of the first Freemasonic lodges existed in the United States on this 9 square grid, and it's oriented 32 degrees like that. But yeah, there's a lot of information in this PDF. I'm just going to kind of jump around and find some interesting points. Here's that building I just described earlier. It's 383 feet tall, but if you notice here, as I mentioned, the pyramid at the top, this is about 20 feet from the top to, let's say, like this base right here, or even this base right here. There, it's about 20 feet. So my guesstimation is that the, line right here is 363 feet from the ground, making it, about kind of like this weird, like collapsing in on itself thing where it's like a symbol within a symbol and they both mean the same thing. And that's the tallest building. It's also in the 6th square of the 9 square grid, and kind of looks just like the pyramids, right? From the side, you have this like triple pyramid roof going on. Why they chose that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really, really, really interesting.
Now, we also have the Knights Tower, which is the 3rd tallest building in New Haven, and this is where the Knights of Columbus have their headquarters. So it's a sort of fraternal organization. And if you notice this from above, the bird's eye view of the building, it has this odd shape. It's the same shape that you can find on your Apple computer's keyboard, the command key.
Yeah.
Now, this is also kind of interesting because it's known as St. John's Arms, this symbol. And in Scandinavian countries, it is a symbol meaning this is a point of interest. Or maybe if you're on a map and you're looking at the map, like in a city and it says you are here, they'll use this symbol, this St. John's Arms sort of looped square. And I find this fascinating that this is in New Haven because throughout New England, there are ancient Celtic structures that have, for the most part, gone ignored. And some of them have Celtic inscriptions on them that look just like this, with the various looped squares and looped, different arrangements of circles. And it's very fascinating, why they ignore this part of American history, why they swept it under the rug. I don't know exactly, but I think it has something to do with politics and the right to be, on this land, who has rightful claim over America. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is we have these sort of Roman and Greek structures throughout New Haven. So our courthouse is modeled after the Parthenon at Greece. It also takes a few design tips from George's Hall in Liverpool, England. So, kind of interesting considering this is an American city built pre-revolution, and there are post-revolution structures that are, sort of British in nature, or at least kind of in the same style, the Georgian kind of style. We also have the Taft Hotel is another fascinating building with a ton of history associated with it. Everyone from Benedict Arnold to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein. I mean, so many different people have stayed at this hotel, and it's it has one of the oldest contiguous bars still extant in New Haven. Formerly a place called Beers Tavern, where the founding fathers went to have a drink. And there's just tons of strange buildings. I don't want to just read through the whole PDF here because there's a lot to get through, and I don't want to bore you, Brandon. But
no, this is fascinating, dude. But I understand if we want to skim through. But dude, and with I'm going to just say Tartarian architecture type style stuff. I mean, this is awesome. This is absolutely fascinating. Now, are any of those big structures like that? And you may have covered, and I apologize. Located within that 9 square area.
Yeah, so the courthouse is the Knights Tower is just on the outer edges of the 9 square. This Taft Hotel is also in the 9 square. The Armstrong Rubber Company building is not, but I included it because it's kind of a unique, kind of brutalist structure, and just very odd looking.
It is odd. Yeah, it's interesting. Way more questions.
Connecticut's oldest building is here in the sort of center. A lot of this is in the 9 square arrangement. Harkness Tower is as well.
Yeah. They have that statue of Atlas out in front of Rockefeller Center. Is that what you were showing up there? The one of him?
This was created by Lee Laurie, the Atlas sculpture, and he is basically like, he's one of the most prolific sculptors of his time. He sculpted tons and tons and tons of amazing works that are all over the United States, specifically in important places like in front of Rockefeller Center, or I think the state of Nebraska or Oklahoma. They have like a huge tower, and on top of the tower of their Capitol building is this bronze statue of a man like throwing seeds out of a pouch. He's called the Sower. It's either Nebraska or Oklahoma, and he built that as well. So this guy who was commissioned, Gamble Rogers and his artist kind of friend Lee Laurie, they went and created a lot of the design and a lot of the really beautiful neo-Gothic elements of Yale's campus. And what you're looking at here in this picture is the Harkness Tower, which if you're driving through New Haven, you'll be able to see it. It's Yale's tallest building. It stands exactly 66 meters tall, and it's built with Standard Oil money. So Standard Oil gave, I think $63 million to Yale at some point in the early 1900s. And people should know that, why would all these oil billionaires give their money to Yale? Because Yale was the first place where rock oil was distilled into petroleum. Yale University actually made that discovery that revolutionized the world. I mean, without petroleum, we might still be riding around in, horse and buggies, right? So, like, this is a huge event in human history, recent history, and it happened at Yale, and all of this money, this wealth was created through that industry, and these guys gave a lot of it back to Yale, and they were able to build a beautiful campus just packed with symbolism. A lot of the architects at this time were a part of esoteric groups. They were interested in these sort of subjects. This was something that was commonplace in the 1900s, early 1900s and 19th century rather. Groups like the Theosophists and all the others. I mean, there's tons. There's spiritualists, and so there's many things that you'll notice when you're going around New Haven that are kind of, a little peculiar, a little spooky looking. And Harkness Tower is no different. It's the only coronary tower built on this side of the world. At least when it was built, it was the first of its kind. There may be others now, but it was the first coronary tower, or crown tower built in America. And it's interesting considering that, New Haven isn't like, it's not where any government office sits, not like the president or is in New Haven. So you have this crown tower that's normally the symbol of like where the king lives here in America, at Yale. And I wonder what that's hinting at, that, Yale is king, maybe Harvard's queen, right? So,
or maybe it was all here before, like they say about Memphis and Egypt and all that, and then it moved over to England, and we just think that this is New England, but really it's like hella old England,
Well, I do like Tartaria for bringing me into all this stuff, because, like, to be honest, I've always been interested in history, but when I started seeing all the Tartaria information, that's what got me really amped up to go out and find out what the truth was. And I just don't buy it with the East Coast, because I could be being fooled, and people who love the Tartaria theory, they're going to get mad at me and say, oh, you're just a hater. But the more research I've done into my local area, New England, specifically Connecticut, the easier it's been to find old photos of these buildings before they were destroyed. I've found photos of buildings that, still exist now, what they looked like 200 years ago. We have names, we have records of how these buildings were built. It doesn't add up that these structures were here longer than they told us, and then somebody came in and just like took them over and said, no, we built these. That could be true for a place maybe further west where, different civilizations existed in the past. I think that could be true for places along the West Coast more so than the East Coast. But with the East Coast, I've found ancient stone structures. They're in the forest. They're not like, in the center of town. They're not like post offices now, there is a clear chain of events here. And this town is, the town that I'm in right now is 400 years old. There's a history. There's a record of the past 400 years. They didn't just make that up. You can go and read, birth certificates from, and like, a lot of old books that I have on these shelves will tell you, like, because they didn't do birth certificates at a certain time in history, obviously, but they had records of people being born at the church or sometimes post office, maybe whoever was in charge of the town, usually somebody in the church, but they would keep record of this stuff. So again, people who are into the Tartaria subject, they're just going to say, oh, well, those records are all fake and it's all a hoax and you're dumb for believing the BS. But I've tried, and I'm an open-minded guy. I love the idea that there could be an alternative history that they're hiding from us, and I don't discount that. I just don't think it's going on with Yale University, because there are buildings that have been standing since the 1700s that they didn't destroy in order to, cover things up. And I do think that it's possible to create these things. They're not that spectacular. It's not like Pumapunku or Teotihuacan, where you're like, whoa, like these people had to have had some kind of advanced stonework knowledge, or maybe they were using a type of cement that we don't have access to, geopolymers, this kind of thing. Not with Yale. You could look at Yale's buildings and see that it was created by some very artistic, very, skilled craftsmen, very skilled. Doesn't mean that they were, a part of some lost civilization. Even though the things that were built 100 years ago were made better. I mean, that's just a fact. Why? Well, back then people actually cared about their country. Yeah. Nowadays we have these politicians who embezzle stuff, and we have, mob run construction companies, and they're using the cheapest stuff they can because they're trying to cut costs and skim off the top. That's the real reason why we don't make them like we used to. It's not because, some ancient civilization used to be here and we destroyed them and erased them and took over their buildings. No, that's ridiculous. It may be true for other parts of the world, may be true for different parts of North America, but on the East Coast, the structures that were here before the colonists, I could point those out. They're the stone walls built by the Native Americans. They're the stone monoliths that the Native Americans built. And some people think that maybe Europeans were here in like 400 AD, 500 AD, and hanging out with the Native Americans. And that's why there are Celtic inscriptions and stuff. It's not because the Native Americans weren't here. They were here, but they were kind of trading and working with the Vikings and the Celts and whoever else was sailing over. Even the Portuguese were here like 800 AD, something like that.
And from China as well.
In China as well. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. People from China were some of the first to sail up the Mississippi and see the mound building cultures. So yeah, maybe they were probably the last people to interact with the mound builders, because the mound builders, mysteriously disappeared. And I was talking to a guy who thinks that maybe the Chinese could have accidentally or purposely inoculated them or, infected them with smallpox. So, as we know, the Chinese had smallpox as far back as like 300 BC, and they had already figured out how to give people an immunity to smallpox through a certain form of exposure to the smallpox. And who knows? Maybe they were doing something like that. But as much as like Tartaria fascinates me, and like the idea that there's a class of buildings that are much older than we're told, none of that to me is far-fetched. It's just far-fetched when you try to apply that to every single city. New York City, for example, there's a Star Fort that once was at Wall Street. Does that mean that Star Fort is 10,000 years old? No, it could be 500 years old. It's still fascinating, that's where a lot of the Tartaria stuff gets far-fetched. And I'm really grateful that that exists, because I probably wouldn't have gone into this research into my own local area if I didn't have somebody trying to tell me that, that it's all a lie.
There's possibly some pretty cool shit you can dig up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there are
you did dig up some cool shit in the form of your own observation. So I'm grateful you've articulated it, because we all want it to be something awesome, but sometimes it's just what you see, which is still awesome because it's verification. We just had Mark Ollie on talking about the sword and the stone, and the way that story goes with King Arthur is that it was a stone, but they take two halves of this massive stone and chisel out the form of a bronze sword that they can pour bronze into, and then they marry the stone together, wrap it with this wire with these sparks and shit, and then pour it, then sparks and shit are coming out. That's awesome. And so literally that's where pulling the sword from the stone comes from, is once the mold's open, it's on one side, and then you pull the sword from it, right? Wow. That's fascinating. So it's married with the legend as well as like the reality of it. You know what I mean? And so that's what you're able to discover with your own observation. And before we wrap here, I've just got another commitment, dude, but I'm gonna get you on again soon. This is too much fun. Okay, check this out, because this is something. So to what you said, to verify, it's Nebraska State. So to Lee Laurie's statue here, Nebraska State Capitol has this dude up there. But that's awesome. I love this dude's work, by the way. Even Atlas, because it looks so like Art Deco and chiseled. You know what I mean? It's like those.
Oh yeah.
Angels.
Well, that was his movement, right? That was like, he's 1877. He was born, so like by the time he was at the height of his career, Art Deco was also probably the most popular style. So yeah, he was the Art Deco guy. I mean, that's what's so fascinating about walking around Yale, is Art Deco. The style is very attractive to the eye, and it pulls you into the scenes on the buildings, because that's what they do. They put these scenes on the various buildings. Everything from depictions of like school life and being a student at Yale to like owls and, Hermes and Shakespeare and all these other characters and mythological figures and even allegorical figures like the sower. Like the sower is not, it's not a myth that Americans believe in, like some magical sower man who sowed seeds across the Midwest. But, in 500 years, people are going to look at that and they're going to understand that. And they're going to look back at this time period and they're going to say, wow, like these people who came across the Midwest, they were like gods. They were like mythical figures, because that's how we remember history. We mythologize it. Wow, look at that owl over his.
Yeah.
Yep, man. That was the calling card. I think that these guys were all part of some sort of esoteric thing, because you see those owls over and over. The owl makes sense on Yale's campus because, wisdom, right? The owl is supposed to be a symbol of wisdom. But now you see Lee using that owl symbol on a government building and you're like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Right?
It gets really interesting.
But yeah,
they're beautiful though. Oh, look at that. King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. We just talked about that. That's a synchronicity, dude.
Sync wink, baby.
How cool is that? Sync wink.
Wow.
One more thing I wanted to show you, but this is beautiful, Mark. Thank you. Is this is something, and it may be nothing. This is just kind of one of these things I do with Dave Zed where I just kind of follow threads with shit. The design of the layout of the city, like we said, was that cube. But when you mentioned that it was at a tilt, that was very interesting to me, because then you have these famous sculptures of these.
Who made that?
There's several. So Alamo sculpture this one is in New York City, I believe. And then you have this one as well, the black cube sculpture.
Did a guy named Osamu Noguchi make that?
Honestly, I can look it up. Let's check it out.
I think it's Osamu Noguchi, because in New Haven, Tony
Rosenthal.
So
located at Astor Palace in East Village neighborhood in Manhattan, New York. But look at the angle that it's at. I would venture to say that it would probably be something pretty similar. And if not, if you looked at it on edge, the angle, you know what I mean? But it's still interesting that there's a cube tilted on its side, which is exactly what, yeah.
You just hit us with another synchronicity, because in New Haven, there is a cube standing on its side just like that. Yep. It is the cube in Osamu Noguchi's Sunken Garden. Shout out to my friend Chad Stempke, who you may have spoken to before.
I'm not, but I'm going to write it down.
Yeah, you should talk to him. He has a book called Stargate Detroit. Ooh. And he talks about this artist, Osamu Noguchi, creating these art sculptures that are essentially Stargate portals. Yeah. And go figure, Osamu built a underground sunken garden in Yale University's campus. You look over a wall down to the lower floor to see it. And it's interesting because a lot of New Haven is underground. There's a bunch of underground tunnels. So it's almost like an acknowledgement of that. Like, hey, we're going to build this art, but we're going to build it on below ground level to kind of give the, insinuation that there's more going on underneath, if you catch my drift, right?
I do. And that led me to, I guess, my final question for you here. Have you dug in literally to the underground of the area and seen if you have ancient tunnel systems, ancient cave systems, mining operations, anything like that?
That's a really good question. So when it comes to ancient caves, we are very close to the water. So sea level, most of the New Haven coastline is just at sea level. So there's not much underground there besides water. But the two mountains in New Haven, West Rock and East Rock, definitely have underground qualities to them. There was one incident in the past where the judges who ordered the execution of King Charles fled to New Haven and took refuge in Judge's Cave on top of West Rock. But I'll do one better. So in all of the United States during the 1800s, snow removal was pretty much by shovel, right? They didn't have snow plows. Maybe, a horse or ox could pull a plow, but I don't think they were doing that with snow. It's kind of difficult to do that. So everybody, instead of just like waiting for the snow to get shoveled, they would use these underground tunnels to access parts of the campus in the winter. So most campuses that were built at that time period have an underground feature to them for that purpose of being able to go from dorms to classrooms and so on, even in inclement weather. And my father, who works for the water department in New Haven, has been underground all over New Haven. So he's told me, you know, what's there and how deep the tunnel system goes. He's even been underneath Skull and Bones' tomb and tried to tell me that there's not much going on under there, but I don't buy that. I think he was on the service side of the basement. They didn't let him see the more exciting side.
Or maybe he walked in there and was like, oh, I can't tell Mark about this. He'll be right. And then walk out, you know. There's no...
Well, yeah. I don't know how long ago that was, but we did talk about that a few weeks ago. I brought all this up with him and he said, oh yeah, I've been under there. And I was like, you never thought to tell me that, you know?
Nothing to see.
Yeah. So yeah, but we ought to continue this another time, man. I don't want to hold you up too much longer.
No. This is perfect. And it's perfect timing, Mark. Thank you so much. Dude, this has been outstanding. Of course, all the ways to find you located down in the show notes. Guys, could not rave enough about this gentleman and all you're doing. So thank you again for this, for everything. And we always have so much more to look forward to with you. So thank you, brother.
Yeah, and I'm going to send you the link to that PDF. If people want to continue reading that, they could go into the episode description and check it out.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll absolutely link it, man. Thanks for doing that, dude. That's cool shit.
Folks who are going to get the PDF, don't message me saying I wasn't able to put my address in there. It's a PDF. You could download it.
Yeah.
We'll have physical copies thanks to this amazing gentleman, hopefully soon. But you and I still have to talk about that. So
and we will do it, man. Absolutely. Like I said, only great things to look forward to, man. This is fascinating. So thank you again, brother. This is awesome.
Right on. Thank you.
Just want to take a moment and thank Mark for coming by and hanging out. Dude, absolutely fascinating. You're welcome back anytime, man. Thank you so much for that. Of course, all the ways to find more about him and his work and what he's got going on and all the cool shit located down in the show notes. Make sure that y'all check that out. Also down there is our resource links. All of those are available to you. We have Food Forest, Opus. We've got the Manifestors Guide. Of course, as well, Coherent Spaces for that Wish unit that we've been pumping all the good vibes out with. As well down there, guys, check out Phi Tribe. If you want to get your good sleep on, your great sleep, rather, that is the way to do it. They have meditation mixes, lucid dreaming stuff. All the Solfeggio series are up. You can also sign up at their website. There's a bunch of new cool shit going on, and you're not going to want to miss it. Definitely check that out as well. Linked down in that show notes. Now, before we depart here, I'd like to just part with some words of just, you know what? Go out into this incredibly beautiful place, whatever the fuck this thing is, guys, and y'all pick up a piece of litter. Be nice to everybody you come across. Of course, buy somebody in line around you a coffee or a meal. Something small goes a long way in the collective, as well as if you're driving along in our highway system out here, anywhere you are, actually, not our highway system. It's all our highway system. Get out of the fucking left-hand lane is what I'm trying to say. Get out of the left-hand lane. You got somebody behind you wanting to pass. As well, just beyond anything else, go out into this beautifully mysterious place and amazing whatever the fuck, and y'all just be good to one another. Thank you so much for watching, listening, engaging, and just being the coolest sons of bitches ever. We'll see you next time.
Sometimes during Christmas, something magical happens.
Hey, Cricket customers. The Max with Ads plan is included with the Cricket $60 unlimited plan at no additional cost. And this holiday season, Max is the one to watch when you're feeling festive.
Son of a nutcracker!
Cozy up to all the holiday classics, like Elf, 8-Bit Christmas, and the Harry Potter 8 film collection. Just log in with your Cricket username and password to experience Max on all your favorite devices. Phone plan streams and standard definition programming subject to change. Fees, terms, and restrictions apply. See cricketwireless.com for details.
At Sleep Outfitters Outlet, great sleep is a big deal. Save 40 to 60% every day on every Sealy, Stearns & Foster, and Tempur-Pedic. Queens as low as $249. Customer exchanges, closeouts, and floor samples. Inventory changes daily, so come in for your dream deal today. With no credit needed financing, expert advice, and up to 60% off retail, it's never been easier to get the sleep and savings you deserve. Go to sleepoutfittersoutlet.com for financing details and to find a store near you.